Thank you all for joining us. And we are absolutely stoked to be kicking off the Soccerex Connected series this week, which looks absolutely incredible. The world has certainly shifted in the last months, and what better way than to tee up the week than hearing from two incredible people who have sat at the heart of the issues dealing with the COVID-19's impact on football. As you mentioned, we have Olivier Jarosz and Heike Ulrich. But let's get right into it, since I know both Heike and Olivier are busy still making sure football is going to continue after this. Let's start with you, Heike. What we've seen from the DFB and the return to football broadly in Germany has been almost a business case of success, where we've seen even the Women's League come back, which was not the case in most countries. But what were the biggest factors that you were most concerned about impacting the DFB and football more broadly?
Yes, thank you and welcome everybody. Happy to be part of this project and this panel. Well, to be honest, in the beginning, it was the biggest impact, the gap of experience with how to handle those challenges, brand new challenges for us. But of course, safety first and health first was a topic number one. So how can we protect our players? How can we protect staff and everybody who was involved in this huge football business in Germany? And how can we come back to the pitch? So that was the focus. Or can we come back to the pitch? And what is the frame to come back to that? So, but still, health number one, clearly. Of course, if you then think about it, just a couple of minutes, it starts with, it's a huge economic machine, this football business. Of course, we come to economic influence to the whole topic. And in Germany, football business means 23 million turnover in total, more or less 90,000 people involved in football business with all circumstances and groups, and 1.5 billion in taxes, by the way. So what are we losing if we don't play week by week, month by month? What does it mean? Third, of course, is social life. I mean, Germany is crazy on football. Football is part of the DNA of more or less all Germans. If we had World Cups, we have 80 million national team coaches telling us which team should play. So it's also social life, which is, really detected or is also defected from not having football week by week for our society. And it's also about a little bit of how do we start? When your introduction said, how did you start? And this is also some social messages we also spread out, because when we started thinking about how to structure our work now, it was never a question of, is it just the men professional league which should start, or should it just be the men national team? From step one, from the first second, we were always thinking about how do we get back our professional leagues. And that is clear that we are then talking about our women's league as well as the big men Bundesliga and second Bundesliga. For us, it was clear we talk about the third men league, which is the highest level here at DFB under our roof, and also the two club and cup competitions. So step one was not just because I also have a background of women's football. It was clear for everybody in all decision-making levels. We talk about men and women football. How do we get football back on pitch?
Yeah, very fascinating. And I think during this time, one of the most interesting graphics that I saw was from Club Affairs, Olivier, where you had the return to play for men and the return to play for women. And on the men's side, it was mixed colors. On the women's, it was mostly red, not coming back. And then right in the middle of the map was big green Germany. So really interesting that you did all of those studies. I thought they were fascinating. And obviously you're focusing more on football clubs. How did Club Affairs approach and break down the definition of football and how to go about the shift that was happening?
Well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everybody following us on Soccerex Connect. Congratulations for the team. And I cannot start by saying and congratulating you, Bex and Heike, for how much you've done for women's football. I'm sure today we're going to discuss a bit about women's football. Also, but I remember when in 2013 with Heike we were talking in Frankfurt, what's the future of women's football, and this is where we are today. Well, in terms of what is happening now in football, I think we have to look at it from a vertical view and a horizontal view. let me explain. By vertically, I think COVID-19 has affected our society, is affecting our economy. We see the GDP disparities going down, also health-wise. And football is not anymore in this bubble, or was never really in his own bubble, but it has to be, is affected by what is happening around. But also we have to look at what is happening on a horizontal level, if I may say so, which means what is happening on the local level, on international level, and also internationally for the different football factors. In this period, clubs were definitely affected by the discussion with the different groups, being the shareholders. Internally, they were affected by employees. They wanted to know where's the future, by the players and staff overall, and they were not playing. And also externally, just to name one, the fans, because fans are there, but there's no more games. And we also see when we talk about clubs, it's also about what clubs, because today we have a term which is quite used, the polarization, which means that today around 50 clubs account for almost 60% of club revenues. And in reality, only big 5 leagues in aggregate are really profitable. So we've seen so far already a decrease in transfers, in volume, but the amounts of deals seems to be back to pre-COVID. And specifically on commercial deals also being reassessed. So I think in the end, last FIFA Football Journal, we also made a kind of on the short, mid, and long-term effects of COVID-19, specifically on football organization and entities. But as you said, interestingly, and it drives a lot of questions, we had 10 leagues, men's football, that stopped, probably more for health reasons and safety reasons dictated by the government, whereas we had 26 leagues that actually stopped, at least in the UEFA Confederation, which means that, and the reason were slightly more related to the cost of restarting, because ultimately the TV deals are lower, the source of revenues are lower, therefore automatically the return to play was much more, I would say, difficult to do.
Yeah, very interesting. And you mentioned there a couple of stakeholders. Heike, I'd love to hear more about which stakeholders you had to involve to approach the return of football, how you managed them, and then how you actually went about making sure that, you know, women's football was included, and then just the decision-making process and communication process that it took from such a large entity like yourselves to get everybody back to playing.
Well, first was that we had to bring in our own structure. And I think one good point was that from the beginning on, we were together with DFB and DFL, which means the club structure plus federation structure worked together from day one. And since March 4, we had a daily briefing in our COVID-19 group, which still exists. So that was a daily briefing until June. Today, we still have it weekly, Monday morning. So I just passed my daily briefing this morning again. Because every day at this time in March we learned, and now we still can say every weekend we learn. We make new experience and we get more familiar with processes. So from March on, we realized we need not just the stakeholders from football business. So we involved the politics, we involved internally from top level president and general secretary down to the security people we need. Of course, our medical people and professors were on our side or are still on our side, because we had to learn. We had to learn more or less minute by minute, and that went very quick. So we had, through that morning briefing, we got all information together, spread it out, checked our goals for the day, and then tried to reach the goals. But to be honest, in these first weeks, it felt crazy. Sometimes you have your goals for the day, and in the evening you think, hey, that was the wrong direction, because the goals are different now. But still, then we realized what are the steps 1, 2, 3, so priorities. And again, first, health. So medical input, medical information, again, first. Second, economics. So who do we need? Of course, we had to speak with our partners. Third, politics. we had to figure out how does our public and affairs and how do our government work with that situation. And so we created a daily network and have an exchange on all those levels, which was crucial to find solution to come back then. I mean, we stopped mid-March and we came back with a men professional league mid-May after many, many discussions internally, but then on the second level also with the responsible ministries, because it was always a double pass between sport and politics. And that was important.
Yeah, that leads us right into the next point, actually, because the mix between sports and politics. Olivier, a lot of these studies that you have done have shown that there has been a lot of support by local government, but you mentioned also that that might cease to exist moving forward. So how have you seen the structures of the clubs shift, and how will clubs be affected by that? And where do they need to make up those revenue gaps now?
Well, to start with, we need to say that Germany was again very efficient, and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said, "Mad in Germany" again. Of course, actually, interestingly, a lot of return to play protocols were kind of copied from the German one, with sometimes with some language mistakes. Coming back to the government, of course, we've seen some package support, and actually most of the countries were lucky enough beyond the FIFA support to also provide support to their sports. We've seen in Switzerland 200 million, in France also you had package. But interestingly, football actually, clubs generate most of their revenue usually from the gate received. On top of that, you also have TV rights deals, the revenues from the owners who also put quite a lot of money from their own pocket. But interestingly, I think it's worth to look at the matchday ticket also source, because this completely disappeared. And this morning, if you look at the studies, there was mentioned 2,500 people on average going to Ligue 1 games, whereas last year was around 24,000. So revenue ticket completely disappeared, and it's actually the third largest source of revenue in Europe. But also this figures doesn't say everything in itself, because even though you had the growth in ticketing in the last, I would say, years, 10% compared to 2017, 2018, you have some areas which is completely negligible, the likes of Kazakhstan, San Marino, Armenia, but it accounts almost to 45% of revenues in Scotland. It's 1/3 in Switzerland, it's 1/4 in Sweden, in Belgium. So there is also an important discrepancy, but I think where it's also very important for clubs to be prepared, and in reality, is that matches, it's not only a direct source of revenue straight into the cash flow, it's also, I would say, the weekly opportunity to connect with your supporters, with the sponsors, and actually the wider world, as well as being the necessary foundation. Actually, upon most of the club's commercial activity are revolving, without even mentioning the fact that live matches are also subject of media right payments. So I think the whole value chain in football has been put in a bit in stake, and the regular competitive matches became actually one of the defining factors of our football, with leagues and cup competition, professional club structure tasked and organized to stabilize this fixtures list. And some were much better, some struggled a bit more. But this crisis also showed how COVID-19 showed the weaknesses of some models, and this model is extremely vulnerable. So I think clubs really need to be more prepared, not necessarily only count on the revenues from the state. Most of the countries still have to finalize the discussion: is football part of the culture, or is it a standalone private activity? A lot of work to be done, and in reality, football clubs, they are not only anymore playing football, they are also entertainment companies, but also they have a more social role to play, a more economic role to play, and a definition of actually what is their function within the society.
Really interesting. And you talk about some of the challenges that clubs are facing. And for you, Heike, what were some of the biggest hurdles that you guys faced from the DFB, or what you saw as some of the biggest hurdles for leagues or some of the stakeholders that you were managing? And how did you work to overcome them? Did you have to take quite a, an active role in supporting them through that? Or did you have to sometimes step back because you're not, as you mentioned, you work together, but you're not necessarily working for them or with them specifically. So I'd love to hear more about some of those challenges and how you overcame them for those listening as well, who might want to know.
Yeah. As I said in the beginning, I mean, the biggest hurdle in the beginning was gap of experience with how to handle that situation, as we all haven't passed something like that before. And we had a very dynamic situation still today. I mean, now in Germany, I think we are quite stable with our system of playing. So we have a really in detail processes for having testing processes for all our professional leagues, and how to handle it, communication flow, if there is a positive case, and how to identify possible people who are still also connected with that person. So this is now, it feels quite stable, this process. So having the players back on the pitch. And now we are working on how to get back at least a couple or a specific percentage of spectators also in the stadium, and what is safe and what is not safe. So what can we handle and what is not good to handle in the current situation. So biggest hurdles, as I said, very dynamic situation still. So no planning, and usually Germans like to plan and have a clear process. So still we are not having, we still have to show a lot of reaction instead of acting. And that's something we had to get used to. Second, of course, the time constraint. I mean, again, the view back, March, and we knew usually the season was planned to end in end of June. And then, of course, we also had to discuss with UEFA, FIFA, how can we handle that season planning. So there was a big time pressure, how to get this all involved with politics. If it comes to revenue and stuff like that, it was like a day-by-day discussion with our partners, of course, because also for them the situation was dynamic and new. And thanks to everybody to be very open in that discussion, as we all had the same goal and the same aim. How can we get back to the pitch in a safe environment and still fulfill our contracts? And if I can speak for the third league, which is our highest man league here, of course, not having revenue from gate fee and not having spectators in the stadium is for some of the clubs crucial. So, I mean, in average, we have like 21% revenue from gate fee. But if you go deeper into the clubs, there's a huge difference between club 1 and club 2. So some of the clubs need spectators. If they don't have it throughout the season, they are in big trouble. So it's really important for us also to find solutions how we can avoid bringing more costs into the club business. Of course, the clubs themselves have to do their homework. They can do it with transfer of players. You can see the numbers also in Germany. The numbers are going down, so they are a little bit more relaxed on that topic. And of course, also our politics and our government is quite helpful to be involved, because they also see how important the football market is for the German market. So they also have very good programs which hopefully help also our clubs. And now I'm not just speaking about the men professional first and second league, it's also for the women leagues and also amateur clubs.
Really interesting to hear about the changes that you've seen, Heike, throughout this. And I think, Olivier, would be really interesting to see, what have you seen in terms of clubs? What have they done that has been positive? What sort of examples have you seen? And one question that has come from one of the audience, which was along the lines of the same question I had, which was, how creative have clubs been in conversations about finding new revenue streams or maximizing existing ones? And you can broaden that out as well to the political structure, as Heike mentioned as well, because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, clearly clearly a lot of clubs and actually all our society was driven by crisis management, and for sure football clubs must be better at planning, not just anymore through strategies, but planning really the future rather than just having the right approach on the crisis level. But I think clubs and our overall organization were already having the exercise of trying to find new revenue streams, multiple and technology-related areas, developing actually a portfolio of activities. But I think what is very interesting to see during this period was that they really increased the engagement in a wider range of social activities. And I think this could tap into new, fresh revenue sources of revenue also through community health and social services. You also definitely have the diversification of different revenue streams. I mean, global video consumption is higher than ever, and certainly OTT on demand is driving incremental viewing. This could eventually, in my view, strengthen the economic stability of a club organization, if, of course, some wise decisions are made with a balance between the potential business and the resilience. But I think one interesting thing is, like before, I would say, before organizations were really planning to predict the future, and they were building a strategy to optimize that future. This is how it used to be, actually. But today, in the so-called, I would say, the new normal, where it's basically almost impossible to predict the future, your focus really needs to be on building the teams, the right structure, the right behavior within your organization to adapt to the future, because we don't know how it's going to look like. And it's actually much more on building than on planning. And this is tough, of course, because what you learn in consulting companies is to rely on processes and quarterly Excel sheets, but that does not work anymore. So yeah, today what we are trying to do also as an advisory group is to help clubs and build those capabilities for the future than just extracting the value from the past, because we'll never come back to the past. And what has been done in the past was not necessarily the right thing to do either. So now it's about what are the assets you need for the future. And yes, it's relatively easy to kind of dominate your small market, especially if we talk about those smaller sized markets. But the goal is continuously to improve your quality, your entertainment, and then you need to diversify. And potentially, you might have new trends in football, the likes of new ownerships, maybe a new reform of eventually how football is organized, how it's structured. We've seen recently in the press some news about competitions. So in the end, we really have to move forward and more clarity, more discipline, and not just wait for the things to happen. And the football club could have a bad year, could have a better year, but they were not necessarily solid. So, through the different tools we have, through the different publication, the club management guide, the club management program, we try to improve management within the system.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And a couple of points just to pull out there is that while there needs to be more clarity and more strategy, there also needs to be the flexibility. So back to you, Heike, as you were mentioning, how have you guys accounted for the potential second stoppage in the game due to COVID-19 or anything else for that matter, considering there's so many knock-on effects?
Well, with a view to the mirror, to the professional leagues, to be honest, we were really happy that it worked. I'm just knocking on wood. So now the view to 2021, we do have some buffers in dates, but if I see the calendar for our men professional leagues, it's really strange. And we have the Euro 2020 and 2021. Mm-hmm. So there's a clear calendar also with international fixed dates we have to work with. And there's not that much flexibility in that market. But as I also said, we have some experience now with the back on pitch, which feels like stable. We have processes now with the local authorities, how to work with the positive cases. So here I've got the feeling that we are quite okay with having the feeling we can really follow up with the season. but you never know. And as I said, we do not have too much flexibility. But for example, one tool we changed our rules for the Canada. So we changed our whole regulation, which means now it's, for example, possible. Usually, I mean, it's usually English week, 3 matches per week. No more changes possible. We changed our rule. So in case of emergency, we could advise to play within 3 days 2 matches, for example. Of course, everybody wants to avoid that because everybody knows that it's not good. But still, we opened the door that in case we are in a situation where we have to take that decision, we could take this decision. Second, if I go a little bit lower, for example, our youth Bundesliga, we changed the whole format for the season 2021. Usually we have also home and away matches for the whole year, and we changed the whole format. To be on the safe side, we said we just have one-way matches. So we have a little bit a bigger group now, but they just play once the match. So we have more flexibility in that in case that we have to stop the league again, especially in lower leagues, we have new formats that give us a chance to show reaction on that. But again, professional leagues, it's a time under, and we try to we try to bring it through, and not much flexibility. So let's knock on wood that we make it.